So I suppose for the audience's sake, Dominic, why is it important for you to talk now?
Well, for the first time in my life, I had heard a number of weeks ago where there was a podcast produced and hosted by Acast Promotions, and which not only would have been in terms of defamed, but that there was somebody allowed on a podcast that was allowed to take the very last moments that I had shared with my father and put it down to me being a thief in robbing my father as he lay dead in the road. And I suppose the narrative over the last 47 years about the way that my family has been described and the way that we've been constantly castigated and portrayed, I don't think is a fair reflection on the type of people that we really are.
We'll get a bit of context first of all. So if you don't mind, we'll go back to the beginning. I know, because I know you many years now, that you had a very, very traumatic childhood. You were there when your mother was shot dead, and again you were with your father a number of years later. Was it 7 years later?
Yeah, 87 and 94.
And you were present at both those killings?
Yeah, I'd have been in the bedroom. I'd just actually got out of the bath and I was putting on my pajamas, and my mother was brushing the water out of my hair when the original bang come to the back door. So we had thought that Declan had fallen in the bath. So at that point she went to see was he all right, and I let the two men come running up the stairs. So yeah, I'd have been yeah. So look, I've stated it before in the past. Like one thing about my mother, she wasn't afraid to die. Like you know, when she did ask the men, she said, "Look, take me out of the house. Don't be letting my children see this." You know, so.
And they shot her dead in front of
her? They shot her dead, yeah, in front of Declan, and Declan's body was like his chest and that there had all the pock marks from the sparks of the submachine gun. Oh yeah, so that was that, and then there was a first attempt on my father's life, the 12th of June 1993 was the day of my brother's birthday. I wasn't present at that, but I was present on the night in Drogheda when he shot dead in Drogheda. So and it's funny, do you know what I mean, because when you're around all that, you know, I suppose I call it mayhem, or people dying and being killed, you know, it's in the lead up to both deaths, you know, you'd be dreaming of death a lot, you know. And prior to my mother's, I was telling her, but there was gunmen coming to the house, but in my dreams they were coming to kill all of us.
That was a premonition that you were having dreams before your mum was killed?
Yeah, so much so that I used to go in there in the middle of the night and I'd tell her that there's men coming to the house to kill us. And then the Saturday prior to her being shot, she had told my father on the prison visit, that was we'd got the privy of having an open visit at that stage. So I remember her leaning across the counter and telling him, look, that she felt that somebody was going to come to the house and kill her, and that I had said that people were going to come to the house in my dreams. And he had said to her, look, sure, why would anybody be coming to kill you? But look, obviously they did come to the house to kill her, and I suppose why now for me is, and why because like the state are holding back the truth about what happened to my parents. More so is that the state have lost my mother's murder files.
All the files?
All the files in relation to my mother's are gone missing. Former murder squad detective has sworn an affidavit to say that he searched both Dundalk Garda Station, Drogheda Garda Station, RD Garda Stations, and that he could find no trace of any file in relation to Mary McGlinchey. He went to Crime and Security in Phoenix Park, and he could find no trace of the Mary McGlinchey murder file. He asked Crime and Security for a copy of their file, at which point they told him face to face that they wouldn't have any need to have a copy of the Mary McGlinchey murder file, which of course they would have had. But notwithstanding that after removing the bath that my mother was shot in, that they threw it in the back of Dundalk Garda Station, and a number of years after decided to plant flowers in it. So it's that contempt that the state would have for her as a woman, and the protection of her two children, because a 9 and a 10-year-old letting the fact that they let two gunmen into the house, more likely the fact that they didn't initiate any powers of arrest, the fact that they lied to the family for over 30 years and clearly stated that nobody was ever arrested in relation to the murder of Mary McGlinchey on numerous occasions, both through leaking things to the media, talking to solicitors, writing letters to solicitors stating that nobody has ever been arrested, and that they had no direct lines of direct leads. And then to find out that in March of 1987 of that year, that a 32-year-old male was brought to Navan Garda Station under Section 30 Offence Against the State Act, and directly questioned for 48 hours in relation to the murder of Mary McGlinchey, and the fact that they felt that they need to deceive the family of that, the fact that the state constantly have allowed the sullying of Mary McGlinchey's name, the sullying of Dominic McGlinchey's name, that eventually that not only did they kill their character, that potentially they've also covered up the fact that how they were killed and who killed them.
So you were 9 when your mummy was killed? Declan was being bathed. He was 11, was he?
Declan was 10.
He was 10?
Yeah, Declan was 10, yeah, coming 11, I think, yeah. So, and Declan, with Declan, it was like he put his hand into the back of her head, and he had told her, you can get up. That actually left. So when there was a woman come up the stairs, and she just found him wandering around, so she wrapped the towel around him. And at that stage then they wouldn't let me up the stairs, you see. So we were brought down then into the front room, and then we were shipped across to a house across the road.
Something happened which straight after this, your granda then came down the road, is that correct?
He came down, and we were shipped across to a lovely family across the road, and so my Aunt Patricia, my godmother, and my grandfather landed down. And at that stage, I suppose everybody was they were on their knees saying the rosary outside the house, outside the front of the house. And I remember looking at that. We were on a window up on the right hand side, looking out down, and we could see my mother had a big Vote Sinn Féin poster in the window. So our house would have been easy enough identified. And my grandfather then entered the house, big Paddy McNeil, and anyway, they brought us over to the front of the house, and Tish went to get the car, and you can see this in the RT News, and my grandfather's ends up remonstrating with must be the local sergeant. So he's sitting in his uniform, and the sergeant saying to him, "Where do you think you're going?" And he said, "Oh, I'm going home." He said, "Where do you think you're going with them to?" And he said, "I'm bringing them home too." He said, "Oh, no, you're not bringing them home." He says, "They're going to the Borstal." My grandfather said, "They're for no Borstal." He said, "They're coming home with me." So, and at that, he big bolt on and pulled down the seat, and we were through in the back of the car, and he jumped into the car and locked the door and drove off. And you can see that, like, it's funny, you know, when sometimes you see the archives of stuff, that you can just show that bit of footage. You know, the next bit of footage, then it showed them obviously taking my mother out of the house, you know.
So when you think about that, that's someone of authority that is there to protect you after such a traumatic event. You've both seen your mother been killed. And this person of authority, this Garda, is saying to your family, who are trying to take you away to safety, that you're going to a Borstal, and in effect, a young offender centre, is just absolutely incredible.
Yeah, but for us, like, we go right back, like, and it's only when you become an adult and you start to actually look back at your past, and like at when both our parents were on the run, we were residing in the 26 counties, and I suppose when I suppose between the period of 1982 and 1984, when we ended up living in Crumlin in Dublin, in a house belonged to Tom McCartan. And as I said to you, like, there was a Garda Reynolds was killed in around Tala at that time, and so there were a lot of raids going on in people's houses, and during the raid, the guard had come in through the door and they busted my head, right, maybe 5.5 or maybe, and he busted my head open with the butt of the gun and just stepped on over the top of me into the house. But and then shortly after that, we were removed from there to the Divis Flats in Belfast. But in the middle of the move, the lorry that we had been throwing up into the back of all the furniture and the doors closed was stopped in the middle of Phoenix Park, and we were just taken back out of the lorry in the rain, sat at the side of the road by the guards whilst the lorry was searched, and then the guards just lifted you up and set you back into the lorry again, closed the two doors, and the next thing the doors open and you were in the Divis Flats. So there was a bit of that there going on, whether it was, I suppose, the state potentially, rather than doing their job and protecting us as children of the state. Because bearing in mind, like, both me and my brother were born in the 26 counties. So, you know, we were just born to two Northern Republicans. But we were born in the 26 counties. Do you know what I mean? Not as if they could turn around and say, oh, they're just fucking boys from up in the Black North or anything like that, you know. And the total disregard that they would have had for both myself and Declan during that period, you know, definitely, like, if I look at it, like, you know, our Declan, he took a massive heart attack at 39, and like, I have no doubt in my mind that the way that he was treated as a child definitely contributed towards the fact that, you know, eventually he just couldn't take the pressure.
I want to speak about that because, you know, I know you many years now, and I knew Declan, and that's the sense that I got myself. First of all, I don't know how you've coped from a child, and how you're so stoic. You're a gentleman. I say that, I know you personally. How you've dealt with trauma is beyond me, because it would have broke a lot of people a long time ago. And what I always remember about Declan was, we had discussions about things and about politics and whatever else. You'd always a more rational head. Declan had the sense to be, he would have jumped to things and been a bit angry about things. I think you kind of, I don't know how you done it, but you dealt with the trauma very differently than Declan did, if that makes sense. And I don't know if you agree with that or not. Or
Yeah.
The pressure seemed to be, not that you hadn't got the pressure, just that you both dealt differently with it, you know.
Yeah, well, like, it's funny that when I've said to you in the past, like, we're very, very lucky that we've lived long enough to look back, you know. And I suppose if you open your eyes and look at things through different lenses, you know, obviously, yeah, there's lots of things about my past that I do a lot differently. But I am blessed to be sitting here today and alive and to be able to look back. In regards to like our Declan, you know, like our Declan would have laid down the road and died for you. Like, no, there was no doubt about that.
Oh, I know that.
But with the same token is, we definitely are two very, very different people. Do you know what I mean? Born from the two, you know, obviously our mother and father and that, but we're definitely very, very different. I personally would look at it, I'm going to describe it like, it's like whenever I lived in the north, it would like falling out of a plane and landing on a cliff. You only see where you can put your feet and put your hands, you know, and I'm lucky now. Maybe a little bit of it then, only I didn't see it. That it's like being where I am now. It's like I'm looking up at that mountain and I'm trying to figure out what way to get up and around it. And there's a crevice there, and maybe I can go around there. And just maybe people would say that's the little bit of the father in me, more my father, and that Declan was more maybe like my mother. You know, that might well be the case. I'm not quite sure, but you know, I didn't spend a particularly long time with my father, obviously. Do you know what I mean? Because he's either on the run or that. But people would say that there'd be big similarities between myself and himself.
So you were with your mother. You had that event where you were taken then away, and you were moved to so many different places. That's another thing. I mean, like, I suppose you can't count how many different places you were.
No, look, so look, prior to all of that, like I suppose my earliest memories of life are actually living in Carlane and Tunbridge. My father had been arrested and incarcerated in Portlaoise, and my grandfather Paddy again had got my mother this caravan that he'd put beside the house. And I'll be honest with you, I loved life then. You know, all my uncles were around me, and you had a big trip to Portlaoise in the van, the prison van. Do you know what I mean? And there would have been John Davy run the PDF, and
Like John Davy from South Derry.
yeah, South Derry got shot dead by the UVF, and Collusion as well. And
yeah,
John Davy organised the prison vans, and on a Friday, you know, apples and oranges and different things would have been gathered up, and if you were lucky, because there wasn't that much room in the bus, and there was lots of people in prison, so she couldn't bring two boys with her all of the time, you know. So and it was around that time that got to be the first time I actually remember of life and feeling loved and all them things that you would have, and playing in fields and going down to the primary school and, you know, holding my mother's hand as she walked down the road to collect my brother Declan, because he had been in P1 at the time. And then my father got released from prison. We moved to Dundalk to Green Acres, and from what I remember, life was great. Like, the house was always coming and going with different men and sizes, but there were lots of people travelling through the house every day of the week. Many's a conversation happening, and the ice cream van would have come around, and I remember my father most of the time he'd have been sitting reading the newspaper that's what I remember, him reading the newspaper on the sofa. I remember days that he might not have been there, but most things stick to me ever is Shimmy Grew calling to the house, and Shimmy was killed later with Roddy Carl. And Shimmy landed one night, and I think it was a Friday night or something, and he said to me, I'm bringing you up to, I think it was Armagh with me. And so there's a petrol station there just before you cross the border. Morgan's had it, and pulled in, they bought me these big massive bag open fruits, the big bags. And the next thing was we got stopped at the border by the Brits, and we were kept us that long by the time we got back into the car. And I had all the sweets out, you know, and then like maybe about 3 or 4 weeks after that, then Shimmy got shot dead by Roddy Carl when they were trying to kill him along with my father. But my father just exited the car about 30 seconds before Robinson Lemons opened fire and killed him. So, and between the mayhem of that, and I suppose living through that, and I suppose people being on edge, and then we had to clear out of the house because allegedly somebody was coming to the house to shoot us, and then we were back in the house again. I remember the night Eric Dale went missing. I remember sitting in Eric Dale's house. We went out to Eric Dale's house that night.
Just for the audience sake, who was Eric Dale?
Eric Dale Eric Dale was a Republican, and the best, from as I remember Eric Dale was always very good to us. You know, we've always been around the house. We'd have been in Eric's house. He married her. He was in a relationship with a lady called Claire, and on the face of it all seemed really, really decent people, and I'm sure they were. But the hunt came. The hunt was on for this informer that had given information that Shimmy Grew and Roddy Card were transporting my father into Armagh, and people started pointing the finger at Eric. So we went. I was in Eric's house that night. I was that small. It was like, I remember I was able to stand up on the sofa, and it was a wooden frame type sofa, and I had my hands on the windowsill, my elbows on the windowsill, and I could see the old Garda car with a sign driving down by, because I called and I said, oh, the guards just after driving by again, and unbeknown to me that Eric was taken from his house that night, and subsequently he turned up, he'd been shot dead. Like there's loads of things said about it, do you know what I mean? And at the end of the day, as it turned out, Eric wasn't the person that they were looking for. The person they were actually looking for was a fellow called George Points, who had been working for the security forces since the 50s. George had a bar in Castleblaney, and it just turned around it was George Points had given the information to say that they were travelling across the border.
Is that George Points that was allegedly involved with Sean South in that?
Yes.
Same person?
The same person, yeah.
So that far back?
That far back. And we go after at Shimmy Grew's funeral, there was a letter, a mass card sent with a number of monies and punts for, because George Points also had Aldi home in Leitrim. And my mother was in Shimmy Grew's kitchen of the house at the wake, and they were reading the mass cards, and one of them was money and a mass card from George Points saying how sorry he was at the loss of Shimmy's life, and George Points was the man that set him up. Which is funny then, if I go back to fast forward then to the irony of these mass cards and leatherette mass cards, and the thing they say, beware the strangers bearing gifts, is that
Freaks bearing gifts?
Yeah, do you know what I mean? That after my own father was killed, there was an individual that had turned up with a particular mass card, and you had serious reservations about it, and then after our Declan died, there was an individual turned up and knocked my door out of the blue with a mass card, and my suspicions was right about all of them. So it's just ironic, do you know what I mean, where I suppose your learned behaviour over time makes you very cautious of who you're letting into your circle.
Yeah, and that was the world that we all lived in.
Yeah.
So just on the day your father was killed, can you just run me through that?
Yeah, but so, like, we were living in Drogheda at that time, and I suppose there'd have been a number of people calling to the house backwards and forwards, and a lot of talk about the Downing Street Declaration, and Bernard McAlliskey had been down a couple of days previous to it, and obviously the conversation in our house was always about politics, where things was at, where the struggle was going. And that morning, my father got up. I'm led to believe that he had taken somebody to hospital that day. And I suppose there was definitely something else going on in the background, where my father believed that a guy called Jack Whitten, an alleged loyalist from Portadown, would have been travelling to Drogheda to meet known Republicans from Dublin on the Friday night in the Boyne Valley Hotel. So him being aware that, or of the belief that Billy Wright and Mark Swinger Fulton had entered into the 26 counties and tried to assassinate him in the previous June, that was a direct result of the connection between loyalist paramilitaries and people masquerading as Republicans in Dublin. And on the Tuesday before he had died, he had travelled to South Armagh, and he'd got out of the car and was taken away by Republicans, where he left it in no uncertain terms that this meeting would have been taking place, and that if they weren't to deal with it, that he would deal with it. The Friday never came, because as he stopped to make a phone call after, well, what actually happened was he came back that night. He'd collected me at the house. We stopped off in the individual's house who gave the mask yard. And then we travelled to the far side of Drogheda to Pat Brannigan's shop, where he would have had a connection with Pat Brannigan through the Republican movement at that time. So, unbeknown to us, that the gunmen were at the shop. They allowed him to enter the shop. They didn't try to shoot him in the house. They didn't try to shoot him in the car before he went into the house. He called me out of the shop, and the two of us got into the car, and at that point we actually sat in the car for roughly a minute, and they didn't try to shoot him outside the shop then either. But they allowed him to leave the shop, and at that point they tucked in behind him, unbeknown to us at the time. So he come out of there and he turned right out onto the main road, and it was just as he was about to turn around in the bend, coming around the bend towards, there's a church down there on the, or chip shop down on the right hand side where the phone box was. And at that point, I told him, look, you have to make that phone call. So, and that was why he turned into the right and pulled into the right. Nobody knew he was making that. Nobody in the world knew, other than I had said it, you have to make that phone call. So he pulled into the phone box, and just before he got out of the car, he'd asked me, was I hungry? Did I want something to eat out of the chip shop? And I told him, no, look, there's food prepared in the house. And that was the last time I spoke to him, because the car had actually went down past us and done a U around the thing and come back. And at that point, they'd come back. They were driving a 323F Mazda. It was a GXI number plate on it, red, black, bit spoiler on it. And because I jumped out of the car and I had roared at him to run like fuck. And in my mind, he had run. In my mind, because everything's happening so fast. But I remember the guy that got out of the back of the car was definitely a lot bigger than the guy that got out of the front. And the guy that got out of the front was small, and he was running fast. And he was firing when he was running. So, and it was only when because I had booted across the road thinking that the shop was open. There was a shop, used to be a shop across the road. And I had thought to myself, right, well, so I'll head for the shop. But it was only whenever I got to the other side of the road, I heard him going, fuck. So.
This is your father?
That was him, yeah. So at that point, he must have been shot a number of times at that time. So like what I then did was I diagonaled the other road, and I remember I hit this gate, and I bounced up the steps, and there was the front door of this house, and I took the whole door with me. Door, frame, everything went down the whole thing went down the hallway, and this woman came out and she was making lunch for her family for school or whatnot the next day. And I just said to him, my father's shot dead. And when I came back, he was like, my father didn't talk. There was none of this nonsense that my father was lying on the road, and he said, Jesus, Mary, help me. There was nobody there other than me and him, and a man came along, and I tried to get him to help me to put him in the back of the car. And your man dropped him. And then I jumped in the car and went round to Brannigan's. And when I come back round again, then there was somebody with a pillow under his head, and one saying prayers and all that sort of crack, So like I remember, you'd be leaning over the top of him, and he'd a little like a dream catcher type thing there, and just it's your father's personal possession, and he's personal to you.
So it's just something you said there's just very, very important, and it's how disinformation has been spread around, the narrative of your father and the legacy of your father, if you like, that this story, because I've heard that story saying, you know, Mary help me. Where do you think that came from?
I suppose when people are in particular situations, you know, they hear and see different things, you know, like my father was shot multiple times, do you know what I mean? And he was shot underneath the chin and out through the top of the forehead. He'd also been shot through the back end of the heart. He'd also been shot through the chest cavity, through the arms and in the legs. It would have been impossible for my father to speak. I was the first person, other than the gunmen that killed him, to see him lying on the road. You know, he didn't speak. If he could have spoke, he'd have spoke to me. He would have said something to me. He didn't. When the guards arrived, I had said to them, "Where were you?" Do you know what I mean? Because they were there. They were there when he came back in the Drogheda that night. They were there, and they waved whenever we stopped at the house on the way to Paddy Brannigan's house. But they weren't there at Paddy Brannigan's house, and they weren't there at the phone box. And to me, that just doesn't seem right. That just doesn't seem right. There's something stinking about all of that. The fact that he was left on the road as long as he was left lying on the road for maybe 6 or 7 hours, whatever it was at the time. The fact that
In what sense? How long did it take for the guards to come?
The guards were there, you know, within a couple of minutes after the shooting. Do you know what I mean? So by the time I had went round till, well, the paramedic pronounced him dead on the side of the road. Do you know, the paramedic said he was dead. Do you know, the hospital was less than 700 metres from, you know, if you could drive down the side road and you'd be there in less than a kilometre. And the paramedics had him as dead at the side of the road. And it was roughly around that then that the guards had arrived, you know, and that, I suppose the poignancy of it, I suppose why I'd agreed to chat now is that, like, the fact that an individual, you know, like, said that I robbed my father as he lay down on the side of the road, like there was people around me, do you know what I mean, when I was taking my father's personal possessions, you know, from his person. I give a full statement to the guards of everything that happened. I'm on public record as saying, you know, what happened on the day and the time of my father's. That's not scavenging. It's not stealing. It's none of those things. Do you know what I mean? And the fact that anybody would think, because anybody would write or say something like that about a man when he's lying in the dead of the road, and would need to question their own integrity anyway. But if they thought that little of him, what does that say about me, or what they think of me, or my reputation, or my family's reputation, or my children's reputation, that somebody would allow themselves to lower me as low as a gutter rat? You know, because like even like one of the big proudest things that I've ever been able to say, that I'm an Irish Republican, you know, and you know, whilst I may not be involved, you know, politically now, I practice my beliefs every day of the week. Nothing. I don't run around trying to bring republicanism into disrepute or any sort of matter, you know. But that somebody, to make money, to line their own pockets, something that my parents never did. My parents never used the Republican movement or republicanism to make money out of anybody else's misery. But the fact that an individual decided that they were going to write a book and throw my parents' names in it and throw my name into it and then go on RT radio and go on podcasts to promote the selling of their book. And to do that to me and to do that to my family, knowing that I'm the only last surviving member of that family, have no respect or no dignity, not even value themselves.
It was clearly a despicable thing to do. And we're talking about Owen McNamee here, which is a matter of public record, and his latest book. A vile thing to say. Why do you think, I mean, what's the motivations behind that?
I'm not sure on the motivation, but look, is
it to sell the book?
To sell a book, disinformation, possibly the fact that like I alone, with the support of a legal firm, Kieran Mulholland, have been over the last 6 or 7 years in a process between judicial reviews against the coroner's court in Louth to find out the truth, the actual truth about what happened in regards to my parents' murders. During that period of time, as you edge closer to the truth, things get possibly a little bit more dangerous. So, when I suppose we'll start on the thing about going into the process, I suppose, of getting the truth and maybe why we are where we are now and why I feel the need that I need to defend this, is that in trying to bring about the truth and seeking judicial reviews, right, that the state have met us tooth and nail in resisting finding out the truth, right? In the middle of that, we then found out through a journalist who had got it leaked to them from the Garda press office that the Mary McGlinchey murder file had been missing from Dundalk Garda station. And then that set into, we weren't aware of that at all, because we had met the guards shortly after my brother's death, and they had told us very clearly that there was no leads in relation to Mary McGlinchey's murder, that there was no need to take DNA from the person of Mary McGlinchey when she was deceased in the morgue. So fast forward that to when we finally get her to view and not take home the autopsy records, where Harbison, who's the state pathologist, after Garda John O'Reilly, who's chief superintendent or the Northern Division at that time, had told us that they didn't scrape the fingernails of victims in 1987, where John Harbison says that he scrapes the fingernails of Mary McGlinchey. He deposits the scrapings in a plastic bag and he hands them to the Garda that's heading the murder investigation. And then we find out then that there is no murder file. The file's gone missing. And then that leads you to all sorts of questions. So if you imagine all of that, and then fast forward to now, that you've got a guy on a podcast and in a book, and he's trying to say, well, the first person to perverted the course of justice in relation to one of his parents' murders was Dominic McGlinchey's son.
And not a word about the guards?
Not a word. So that I had to get up at my father's inquest and correct the guards on the information that they got from me when they put me in the back of a car and made me give a statement outside Pat Brannigan's shop. So, and then I had to correct them on that, on what I believed was potentially the type of weapon that might have been used in the shooting. The fact that the, well, whether you call it collusion or not, the fact that on the first shooting on the 12th of June 1993, that we have a number of people that never seen Billy Wright before, wouldn't know what he looked like, and they've all identified Billy Wright as being at the scene of Reddypenny.
That was the first attempt?
That was the first attempt, the time he was shot in the hand, shot in the forehead, and shot twice in the back of the head.
Around that first attempt on your father's life, I mean, the story in itself is incredible. Just for the audience sake, can you run me through that?
Yeah, so My father had left the Fairways Hotel and he was heading towards the Ready Penny area of RD, and he had two young girls in the car with him. And I'm not sure if he was being followed or not, but in some of the witness statements that there's a car that seemed to be similar to the attack car and a van parked close to the Fairways Hotel, right? And that there's two men seen standing outside of the car. So I'm not sure the distance. That's maybe 11 or 12 kilometers, maybe less, maybe 8 or 9 kilometers. So what happens is that he pulls into the driveway, and generally what would be happening is that my brother and another man were in the house on his birthday waiting on him coming, and he pulled in, and as he pulled into the driveway, the attack car pulled in behind him, and a guy gets out with a baseball hat on him and he has a gun in his hand. And my father exits the car and he shouts at him, "Stop waving that gun around, there's children in this car." At that point he seen your man cocking the weapon, and he ran at him, and as he's running at him he grabs the end of the weapon and he fires a burst, so shooting him through the hand and through off the top of his forehead. So I suppose a struggle ensues between the two of them at that point, and the two girls that are in the car have very clearly identified the gunman at this point, or they've made eye contact with them. So they got out of the car and looked again, and they seen him for the second time. So my father then struggling with him, and he disarms him of the first gun. So unbeknownst to him, your man pulled out a 38 and shoots him twice in the back of the head with the 38. And then he disarms him of the 38, and as he disarms him in the 38, he pushes your man right in on top of a rose bush, and he makes his way around. But just before that, the guy who somebody, a witness, has identified as Mark Swinger Fulton, a person has identified him as that person, or somebody who fitted that description, is saying to the guy to hurry up the fuck. So he gets in around the back of the gate. Your man gathers himself up and goes back to the car and receives the third weapon and comes skipping in around the corner. And at that point, the two girls are hiding under a car, and they witness him for the third time. So my father falls in through the back door of the house. The house has weapons in the house. There's two legally held weapons, a rifle and a shotgun. And at that point, he tells my brother that he's been shot. So your man, the gunman, must have thought that the game was up at this stage. So he runs around and gathers up the two weapons that's on the ground and disappears. So from that day to the day that my father died, my father didn't believe that anybody else other than Billy Wright was responsible for the attempted assassination.
And that correlates with eyewitnesses?
Allegedly, a farmer who witnessed the guys and a female that I'm led to believe witnessed them when she was cutting grass, so that she's ID'd them as well. But one of the individuals, one of the girls in particular, when brought to the Garda station in Dundalk by her father as a child, had never seen Billy Wright before. And let's just photograph 36 in the book. Your man opened it and she puts her finger and says, "That's the man there."
Firstly, what is Swinger Fulton and Billy Wright doing as far down as that, working in the south? Where did the intelligence come from? And clearly there has to be some form, I don't use the word collusion lightly, but there were other actors obviously involved in that were Irish citizens in the south or working for the government. What do you think?
So, like, at the time, you know, we had, I suppose after his death, like I had given 2 interviews, one to Anne Cadwallader and one to Ed Maloney, because, like, I suppose the world's a very, very different place now, but as a 15-year-old lad, like, you were probably privy to information that you shouldn't have been privy to. But the information that I'd have been privy to at that time, even as a 15-year-old, and had been exposed to, would have been that people masquerading as Republicans in Dublin were actively working with loyalist paramilitaries in Portadown. And that my father was working and had met Martin McGuinness on a regular basis about this. So either it was that the peace process was coming and Dominic needed to be getting rid of, either people that were up to their necks and stuff that they shouldn't have been involved in needed Dominic gotten rid of, or people that had a score to settle their score. Now, and I've said this, I've been on record as saying this a number of times. There are very, very little people in the state that can murder a husband and wife in a 7-year gap and carry out an attempted assassination, right? No traceability of weapons in any of the 3 shootings. Never used before or ever after again. No traceability of anything, full stop. The attack car that was used in the Drogheda attack, a car very, very similar to that, just automatically turned up with a device, or an alleged device had went off outside Crossmaglen police station on the night of the attack. So a car very similar to that had been stolen from a farmyard in Castleblaney. But a car very, very similar to that had been robbed out of the Malone Road in Belfast 2 weeks prior to the shooting with the Belfast registration. The only car that's never been found again is the car that was taken from the Malone Road in Belfast. But the car that was taken from Castleblaney turned up outside Crossmaglen police station. So somebody with knowledge within those circles knew to muddy the waters. Somebody at the very, very top in either British security services or a Republican who was dirty or working with British security services knew to put a dye in the water. That's my belief. I have no proof in it. Do you know what I mean? What's ironic is that, you know, that did the powers that be think that Dominic would be bad for the peace process, that he couldn't be talked to? That's all very, very, very possible. It is all very, very possible. But and if that is what it is, that's what it is. He won't be the only one. Do you know, if we look at go to the Ukraine or go to any of these places and go to Iran and look at the generals that have been taken out because people know that they can't be worked with. It's about clearing the way, and if that is what it is, that's fine. Do you know what I mean? We'll have to get on with it, but you know, it would be nice to know. It would be good to bring closure to it.
I think that's a thing for many victims' families, whether they were killed by Republicans or state actors or whatever. It's the not knowing. For many people, it's just finding out the truth.
Yeah, so like I've said it, like people think it's blasé saying it. Like I genuinely sit down, like I'm talking to you now, and sit down and break bread with the people that either killed my mother or my father. Like at the end of the day, like we're coming out of a conflict, right? We're coming out of a conflict where some of us at times were gullible. We were played off each other. We were like puppets and strings for the securocrats and the security forces, and there was bad things happened. And that's part of the war. Do you know what I mean? That's the way that it was. But because I said to a brother of an IRA volunteer recently, like I said, like they all died for Ireland in some weird way. Do you know, on the Republican side, do you know what I mean? We all say that our family died for Ireland. Do you know what I mean? But As you know that your brother died in active service. When you carried that coffin, you know that he went out in the car and the Brits killed him, whilst he was trying to free Ireland. And you'll have that with you. You can have that like a pride, like a badge of honour in your chest. Do you know what I mean? My father got kicked in the mouth as he lay dead in the road. So that's the difference, like, you know, and bad enough that they tried to take whatever dignity from him when he was living. That they actually tried to strip him of it when he was dead, and then that they would try to, you know, strip his only living son of it, what, nearly 30 years after the fact.
This is a very, very important point, Dominic. So the narrative around, or the legacy around your father has been dictated. Public discourse has been shaped by tabloid media and rumours and innuendo and other stories. And the truth is amongst all that. And all you have is the truth from the people who knew him, you know, that story isn't told. And there will be people that say, listen, he was a valiant Republican. He deserved what he got.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're going to get that.
Yeah.
But what's missing here is a story of a father, you know, the story of a mother, and them stories that you told, those private moments that you had with them. And you, I mean, we've spoke many times, and you kind of accept that people will have those views.
Oh yeah.
But the difference is, why should you be demonised now, 30 odd years after his killing, and after your mother's killing? Why should you still live under that vilification? Because it's a broad stroke against many people. I mean, I get it myself because I come from a Republican family.
Yeah.
You know, particularly if you do well.
Yeah.
You know, that, you know, it's the sins of the father.
Yeah.
And you have no right to be successful. You keep your head down, you know?
Yeah, but look, I'd be honest with you, like, as you would well know, like, do you know what I mean? I've spent most of my life pushing against the norm of what people would expect you to be, like, do you know what I mean? Like that guy and what he said about me, do you know what I mean? Like, he thought that he could say that I was some jumped up juice head, do you know what I mean? That was living in some backwater estate, do you know what I mean? And that we just didn't matter. That, you know, I might be in some sort of a institution, or might be in prison, or might have a drug addiction, or, do you know what I mean? Like, they don't see that we have a positive contribution to make to society, like, do you know what I mean? That we matter, that our children matter. Do you know what I mean? That they feel that it's only their class that matters, and that we're people that's just here to be subservient to them. You know, they don't understand that I've reared 4 incredibly young men and a beautiful wife, and they're all very, very special people. Do you know what I mean? They are, like, and like, that's, I'm very, very, very lucky that I've had the opportunity to have a life with them, and that I suppose I'm not being corny about it, but the chance that you get to heal a bit, does that make sense? Do you know, I remember when shortly after Big Jock got killed, and that me and you were talking on the phone, and I said, even then, like, we have no idea how lucky we are we made it. We actually made it through this, do you know what I mean? Because he probably thought that he'd made it, and he hadn't, do you know what I mean? Do you know, like, and I'm not, I remember when up and we were speaking to the guards about my father and mother's murder, you know, and your man had asked me to come outside with him. I asked me to go outside the room, didn't need to use the bathroom, and I said no, I didn't, you know, I didn't need to use the bathroom. He said, look, I want to order you. Do you know, and he said to me, looked me in the eye, and he said to me, look, he says, you know, I wish I could tell you, he says, who killed your father, but I can't. I don't even know if I fucking like you. He says, or hate you, or fucking feel sorry for you. He says, you mark my fucking words down. He says, you have no idea how many times, how close you have came. He says, in the life that you're living now, he says, boy, he says, you keep on it, he says, you are one lucky bastard. So when I get, like, I go back and think that, what, 4 times, I think, yeah, the cop stopped me one time, and I was 17, he says, 4 times, young McGlinchey said, they've tried to kill you already. He says, up in Castle Dawson, the loyalists call you Scooby-Doo and Mad Pup, he says, they are not going to let you live, like, he said, not a fucking notion. He said, they're going to let you live. You know, they are going to take you out. You know, living in my granny's house in Balahi, you know, my granny used to be petrified. You know what I mean? You'd be shot in the house in front of her. You know what I mean? Sometimes if things was hairy enough, you know, her Sean had moved out and I was awarded his bedroom, and you know yourself at the steel doors, and so you go in, you'd pull the steel door behind you, and that was the only place you'd feel safe. You know, when you'd wonder, Jesus, being behind the steel door, wondered, are they going to shoot you up through the floorboards, or they're going to jump up onto the porch and shoot you in the bed through the window, or, you know, going out through over the back wall and not opening the gates and down through the football field. I think I'm back to the death of Sean Brown and around 19 car running around the town and the red golf, and everybody's aerials were up. Everybody knew somebody was going to get the touch because McRae had said somebody was going to get the touch. McRae told us after we stopped the parade that time, Monday morning, we were going back to work, and the cops lying up in their jeeps saying, "She's fucking Fenian, she have no work to go to." And I remember STC trailers ringing me saying, "Are you not coming to work?" They ringing the house like mad. "Why aren't you at work? Those trailers need to be painting." And Mid-Ulster Radio driving down the road to work, and McRae come on and he says, the people of Balahi will pay a heavy price for their victory. And I remember that, and people say it was because Martin McGuinness got elected. Do you know what I mean? That was personal to him, more than Martin McGuinness getting elected. Do you know what I mean? McRae decided that the people of Balahi had to pay a heavy price. And unfortunately, Sean Brown and his family paid the heavy price. Do you know what I mean? And that, you know, I look at that whole marching thing around Balahi, and Martin McGuinness coming down, and Ronnie Flanagan went down and sitting down, and us getting bait stupid by the cops because Tobermore wanted to come to Balahi. They kicked the Pope ban and parade our town on a Friday night. Do you know what I mean? Just because they were heading to a band parade in Ballymena and thought that they had the right to get off their bus and that we would be kicked up and down our own streets. And that by the blessing that the people actually united and came together. And it was a Saturday evening. Mairead Hurley, I think, got her arm broken. We got a bad thrashing. And I remember waking up the next morning and bits in bed. Wasn't a bit of me not sore. And looked out through the front and I could see all the orange men out the front of the house, went out the back wall again and over the field. And I remember going up the top of the hill, and the road was black with people wearing GA jerseys. And I think it was the priest, he was at the front, and Sean said to me, shouts up from the back, "Dominic, get you to the front." Big Davy Strahan locked arms with me, and cheers, we thought, here we are, we're getting another hiding again. But, you know, in that sense of community, a sense of belonging, real powerful stuff, like, do you know what I mean? We thought we were going to take over the world. Not only did we know that the chairman of our club potentially was going to be shot dead for it, or banana stuff, like.
As it said, and it started with Dominic, I mean, you've lived an incredible life, and to see you coming out the other side of it, and I think that's one thing that they fear most, is the fact that our generation and our friends, men like us now, are a professional class, successful businessmen, academics, people in the media, barristers, lawyers, and that's where they see the threat, or where they perceive the threat now, and that people like me and yourself don't keep our heads down now.
No, I wouldn't be keeping my head down for anybody. Do you know what I mean? Like, at the end of the day, I go with my business. Like, at the end of the day, even what I do every day of the week, do you know what I mean? I say I practice my Republican beliefs. There's not one day that I get out of bed where I'm actually setting out to do ill intention on somebody. Do you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, like, and I teach all my boys, do you know what I mean? As I always remember, like, my father would always say to me, you always, Dominic, no matter what you do, son, he says, stand up for the man that can stand up for himself. Do you know? And all my boys, I tell them the very same thing. Look, you know, the greatest gift that you can do is just actually stand up for somebody that hasn't got the ability to stand up for themselves. Because someday you might be weak, and somebody will come and stand up for you. You know, and that's a massive thing to be able to do. You know, And I do think like that, like I suppose even doing this, do you know what I mean? And you know, like my wife would be really, really, really protective of me, and she, oh, Jesus, Dominic, you know. But within the narrative of what Owen McNamee has done, you know, he has pushed the button, unbeknown to him, you know, that I suppose is like, not saying it's a ego-driven thing or anything like that, but I suppose it's like, you know, there's an inner thing inside of me, that thing that says I'm right, you know, and, you know, I suppose, like, it's that thing that you have to do what's right. You know, I have to protect my family name. I'm lucky enough, you know, that my father called me after, and I'm blessed enough that I have a son that carries my name. And by God, I'm going to protect it.
And this is where I want to end it, Dominic, because the irony is here, you had no childhood really. You didn't. And you never, you know, you had fleeting moments of what we would all consider family, because your father was either in jail, your mummy was killed early, they were on the run, they weren't there, you were moved from pillar to post. But in the end, it took for you to have real family, and I know Nicola, and I know your lads. And that's something that I see that surely has given you the strength that you have now, like, you know.
Yeah, like I remember having a conversation with a very, very good friend of mine, you know, Republican as well. And I suppose when in debates that you would have about where the strategy is and where the struggle's going, and you know, and I'm very, very honest about it. You know, I said, look, I love my wife to bits, like, I really, really do. And if I thought that any means would win us our freedom, you know, I have no problem with that. But my wife's my Achilles heel, and I'm really, 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 you know, proud to say that. That isn't, you know, I'm happy with that. But that doesn't mean if I thought 100% that, you know, by giving it all and that we'd win. Do you know what I mean? Right? But I think at the minute it's more about living for Ireland than it is about dying for Ireland.
Dominic, I'm very humbled. I know we're friends for a long time, but I'm very humbled that you've asked me to share your story.
Thanks. All right.